Welcome to Conversations in Mind. This is a space for conscious inquiry, where metaphysics, new thought, and the science of mind meet real life. In a world calling for deeper awareness, we explore the nature of consciousness, the power of thought, and the presence of spirit moving through everyday experience. And now, here are your hosts, Barb Bue and Gilbert.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations in Mind, where we try to live into this question of what if our minds are more than just a collection of thoughts, and what if they are a gateway to an entire new way of living. We're really glad you joined us today. We're going to have some fun today, I'm sure of it. I'm Reverend Barbara. I'm joined by my fellow minister, Reverend Gilbert, and we have a special guest for you today that I'm going to let Mark introduce in a minute. But we do come here to demystify the study of new thought and dive deep into the science and soul of consciousness. So today, we're going to ask some questions about, well, men. Now that song is going to go in my head. Men. So sorry about that. But how does a man balance spirituality and strength at the same time? And so I'm very happy that we have a guest, because I can't really speak to this, but I do have questions that I hope that the rest of you will enjoy as well. So hey, everybody.
Hey, Barb, thanks for the intro and welcome, everybody. And as she mentioned, we've got a special guest today. We haven't done a lot of guests, but we're honored to have Reverend Eamon Duffy with us today. Eamon is he's a spiritual director for the New Thought Men's Community. And the New Thought Men's Community is an online and in-person group that supports men and grows New Thought ministries in all flavors of New Thought. And I'll let him speak a little bit more about that in a moment. But we're here to discuss a question, as we always do. And the question that we have on mind is the question of, how does a man in today's society balance spirituality and strength? How does a man balance spirituality and strength and do that at the same time? And we'll see that as a bridge for discussing men's work. But Eamon, as we get into that question, maybe while I start and turn to you and maybe just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and your ministry.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here with you guys. You two, excuse me, not guys, you two. And, you know, I think it's great. I love what I do. I've done 30 years of men's work and 30 years of new thought. And that's my passion. Absolutely. And so to be in the space of being the spiritual director of the New Thought Men's Community and our vision of building healthy masculinity in the world is what's needed right now. And so I'm honored by the question. And also it's fascinating because, you know, how do we build strength? And I think just to start us off, you know, it's men, we're talking about men, but also there's this idea, there's this experience that we have of masculine and feminine. Mm-hmm. So Barb, I think you're in a great place to be able to share with us you know, on that level, on the feminine level and on the masculine level, all of those things, because we all have both of those within ourselves. And there is a balance that we have in that experience of who we are, and that we have labeled these things as masculine or feminine, when actually we could just label them in different ways. As to, you know,
like humaning, you mean?
like human being, like, oh, like that's a masculine trait, yeah. Or that's a feminine trait, and it can just be a trait. So trying to break down that, you know, those things that separate us rather than those things that bring us together. So
Sounds great. And a little bit more about your ministry. I'll simply say that we'll put the website for your ministry in the show description, so people who are interested in your work can connect with you and find out more about the both online and in-person things that you do to support men, and you support everybody. Really, you're supporting both men and women through your ministry, but its focus is on the masculinity. There's a key point, and I've told this story, and Eamon, I know you know it really well, and Barb does too. It's the fact that men's work was a key part of my spiritual growth, because I felt like as a man in this society, there were certain expectations on me on being a man, and one of them was not to be soft, not to be woo-woo, not to be anything that showed less than full strength in the material world. And when I had a draw or a desire to understand more about the deep meanings and understanding of life, got into meditation, got into various faiths and traditions and studied them, and got out deeply into the spiritual path, one of the things that really served me was men's work, to find that there were other men who thought like I did, and felt the same sort of inner conflict of how do I navigate in what I think is expected of me as a man in this world, and the inner feeling I have that sometimes I felt was in conflict with it, because I really saw an interconnection of everything and an aspect of both the masculine and the feminine in me, as I saw the world was telling me to be one thing, be, quote unquote, be a man. And there was this package of ideas about being a man, yet who I was included that, but transcended it. And it was difficult for me to say, well, how do I be a man as everybody wants me to be a man, and still honor this draw and pull within me to be spiritual? And I think that's been once I found that there were other people moving through that same issue, it gave me support and allowed me to delve more deeply into that inner conflict I was having.
So I'm curious, both of you, how would you define healthy masculinity? Like, what if you said that's your vision? So in a nutshell version, how do you define that?
Yeah, healthy masculinity means for me anyhow, and I think we all need to define that for ourselves. As with Mark's vision, there's this kind of societal understanding of what is masculinity, and all these roles and all these things about what that looks like, and all the experiences, all the expectations, all the self-sufficiency, identity wrapped up in all of this stuff. And so for everyone, it's going to be different. But for our vision, healthy masculinity looks like seeing everyone from this spiritual perspective, right? So that we see, and in our philosophy, it's easy. It's easy for me as a minister, because I can go, Barb, I see the divine in you. Mark, I see the divine in you. Everyone, I see the divine in you. And you may present as this external, unique, and diverse experience of, brown hair or blue eyes or gray hair a little bit, or, different skin color, all of the things. And that makes that diversity of life beautiful. We're not monocropped. We're not all the same. In fact, everyone is different. And throughout time, everyone is different. And so I think to celebrate that uniqueness, that diversity, and know that enriches all of our lives. And when we stand in this idea of equality, which I believe is the founding of what our country stands for, the United States stands for, is equality for everyone, that everyone gets to stand on an equal footing. And also, what as a man, what kind of, what of these roles do I want to step into? Is it like, there's all these roles that are up right now, kind of in our face, right? And politically, societally, that are like, okay, what would a healthy man do, right? Well, in my view, a healthy man would stand up for others, would stand up and be healthy within, to work that inner process, as we do in New Thought, so within as without. So when we're working and healing, doing our healing work around all of these things, especially that Mark mentioned, the process, the experience, the belief systems, the reality, the indoctrination into society, into religion, of our upbringing, all of these things. We have these layers of who am I and what am I, who do I have to be as a man, right? So society would tell us healthy masculinity is this, but maybe our heart or spirituality would tell us that healthy masculinity is something else.
Yeah, to me, it's a lot of it gets back to the golden rule, and it's treating others as you wish to be treated. Absolutely. And melding that whole idea of seeing our interconnectedness. And I agree with you 100%, Eamon, that new thought, because we say that everything is interconnected and everything is one, it's easier for us to get to the space of honoring the masculine, the feminine, however they show up on the planet, because we're going to treat every person as part of that one. And that means we're going to treat everybody with dignity and respect, so that a healthy masculinity is going to say, I'm living my unique life as this person who was born as a man and has this cultural overlay of what's defined as masculinity that I have to weigh and decide what parts of that really are working for me to hold up healthy masculinity and not get into quote unquote toxic masculinity, which is of course a buzzword these days, and find myself to be the strongest positive man I can that is supporting everybody no matter what their gender is. And so there is this aspect of me that starts with the treating everyone to uplift them to the highest and greatest life that they can live, no matter who they are physically or in their mental state within their gender identification. And so what that means then is that we start from that basis. But I would add to that it's not, for me, it's not been a static description of healthy masculinity. I think those aspects I just described have always been part of what I saw as healthy masculinity. I take what I'm supposed to do as a man and meld that into being kind and considerate and uplifting for everybody, harming no one. And so that, but there's also a growth aspect, whereas over time, and we can get into this later if need be, is that my sort of definition of masculinity has sort of broadened so that healthy masculinity now incorporates much more of a spiritual, etheric, non-physical aspect to it, which we can talk about later.
Yeah. Love it. And we're working with these different layers, and if we go kind of into what is the definition? Where are we? Where is our perspective? Where are we coming from? Right. And so if we're looking at, the societal version, which was, on the intro, this human, very societal, very norming of, me growing up in the 80s and, hey guys, I said, hey guys, that, was very much just an unconscious saying, instead of then now replacing it with hello, everybody. Oh, hi, Barb. Hi, Mark. And so how do we move into being more aware of what are the things that even in our languaging can be disempowering, and how do we move into this more mature aspect or this spiritual perspective that we have of, being of love, being of service, being of support and nurturance to build a world that works for everyone, right? What a concept. I mean, that's the thing that excites me. And, in a world that needs service, that needs us to show up for one another as human beings, to bring our brilliance and genius, no matter if we're a man or a woman. The world needs all of it right now. And the truth is I think in being able to appreciate and honor the LGBTQ community, who has really over the last many years helped kind of break those things down and say, what is that really? What is masculinity? What is femininity? Do we really need to label it in these ways? And to just say, yeah, I am just a strong person, or maybe I'm more, mental and need more structure. Maybe I'm more from the heart. I grew up just like more of an emotional person and more coming from more of my heart space. And yeah, I was a tender and gentle person. I always have been that. And that makes me look less masculine in some ways, and more more balanced, which is who I just genuinely am. I've had to work on we work with what we want. We teach what we want to learn, right? So, for me, understanding who I am as a man has kind of been this lifelong pursuit of growing up with a very strong mom who, was more of a masculine kind of personality in my life. My dad was much more passive, much more gentle, much more kind, and 3 sisters. So I grew up in a very feminine household, which allowed me to just be my authentic self. I didn't have brothers beating me up or, knocking the trying to put me into that role of the stereotypical masculine. Let's prepare our son for this harsh world and toughen him up, as so many men that I've talked to have happened,
So I'm curious about something though. So there is this very interesting thing going on in the United States anyway right now, where there's this, call it toxic masculinity, but there is a very loud voice. There are very loud voices attracting young men into this idea. And it seems to me, as I read and see some of this stuff that comes around, focused very much on how you treat women not well, and that defines your masculinity and so I'm wondering, like, I for some reason, oddly, in my Instagram feed, I end up with quite a few guys who are pushing back and calling out men for this behavior, and they'll put somebody's video on the screen of their garbage and then talk about it and call them out on it, and even a couple of them who will catch, get videos of people who are saying inappropriate things in public places and then reporting them to their jobs and totally outing them in the world. It seems like we are not talking about that in New Thought. We're not talking about any of that. We're not really talking about men anyway, but we don't really talk about women either, but we're not talking about that or pushing back about it or inviting anybody into a different experience or a different way of thinking about it. And I'm wondering, like, as a movement, should we be taking some of that on or our leaders, you guys, standing up in a way and saying, either calling out that behavior or really calling different behavior to the front. I don't know. I don't quite know how I'm saying.
You're making a good point, though, Barb. I think that do we push back against it and call it out, or do we teach something else? But
more visibly focused on men's behavior and men's minds and hearts and being in a way that's more public.
Yeah, from the organizational standpoint, I'm not sure how I would answer that. I think there's probably a role for us to speak to the fact that we need to treat everybody with dignity and respect and love, and that anytime anybody does any of that, we need to call it out. So that, yes, I think
you guys are seeing this stuff, right? I'm not the only one seeing this.
And I'll tell a quick story. When I was younger and went back to visit my parents, and they were a very fundamental religion. It was Father's Day. And I would have my 5 kids with me, and they were teenagers at the time. And the minister's message was essentially that it's the father's role to, set the stage for and control. These were his words: control his wife and his children. And and his message was very harsh in terms of, the man needs to stop, and the woman needs to basically be subservient to the man in the marriage. That was
they're still doing that. I mean, I just saw one today. Like, that's still happening.
And so my point is, and although my oldest daughter was very assertive, I had to hold her back from telling the the minister when you were walking out of the church where he could go, because she wanted to get up and just yell at him in the middle of the service. Said, you're not going to change his mind, hon. But the point I wanted to make was that very quickly, you can go from being in a church in a faith that says that message, and the message wasn't mistreat women. The message was there's a roles, and they had this very sort of hierarchical role where the man was over the woman. But there wasn't a message of harm in it other than creating the hierarchy itself. But there's a quick step from going from, well, the man's above the woman, to the man can tell the woman whatever to do, the man can mistreat the woman. It's very quick. You don't have to go very far to go to sort of an abusive message. Whereas when you come to a message of we're all equal and all one, we're all interconnected, you don't even think about that. You don't go in that direction. So I think most of the men who come to New Thought are already sort of beyond the toxic masculinity aspect in their mindset. And they're struggling with how to bring their sense of oneness and the unity to balancing that with what their expectations of the culture in terms of being masculine. I think most folks who are coming to New Thought masculinity don't have that mindset that they would mistreat women to begin with. So, but the bigger question is, when we see it from people who are not in the community, what do we do with it? Yes, call it out, but also teach another model. Teach a model of love and respect and honoring people for who they are. And I think in the most part, we tend to, this what you resist persists. What we push against, even though we need to call it out, but then not dwell on it. We need to call it out and show there's a better way. And a better way is to honor that there's the person that you are mistreating by your actions is a person who is valuable and needs to be treated with dignity and respect, and honor their differences, but also honor their equality with you. And yes, we call it out, but it's easy in the sort of the internet world that we live in to get into toxic arguments that elevate themselves. So there's a real balance between that's wrong and here's what we would say about that, and then not engage in the continuous pushback on it, because oftentimes that doesn't work to change people's minds anyway. You have to show them another path, and they have to grow and evolve to get to that point. They have to bring them out of seeing, their twisted way of interpreting Christianity as a means of mistreating women. They have to grow beyond that. Eamon, what's your thoughts? I rambled a lot on that.
No, it's great. It's good stuff, and I agree. It's, just at the 250th anniversary of our country, neo-Nazis marching, on a subway, and marching in our state's capital. It speaks to the level of pain and the level of fear that these guys are going through. And, I think it's important to recognize that, and we do through spiral dynamics, right? So people are on different levels of awareness, different levels of consciousness. And to Mark, I agree with you, as I think it was Mother Teresa said, don't invite me to an anti-war rally, but if you're having a peace rally, I'll be there, and so I view my particular role as a spiritual director to hold that high vision and to know that greater intelligence, to provide opportunities for men to show up, to be able to do the deep inner work around their own fears, around their own pain, around their own upbringing, around their own sense of inadequacy, or a sense of being left behind. And those are very real experiences of what men are going through in a time of change, because this is a time of change. Societal roles are shifting. Women are stepping forward beautifully into power and strength and equality. And men are struggling with this because they don't yet know what the new sort of structure looks like. How is it? How do we show up? So I think there's a couple things going on here. One is men are confused, and as they're falling back into these roles that have been perpetuated since caveman times, me have big club, me in charge, kind of philosophy, or showing up in that bullying, in that dominating kind of sense. And then also to be able to speak to one, organized religion, as well as wealth and power. Kind of one of the things, there are some of the things that we're talking about. Wealth and power have backed racism for as long as racism has been around, because it benefits them. It's using the old, look, those people over there, those transgender people, those gay people, the women, they're all taking your piece of the pie. And meanwhile, the bankers and the wealthy and the billionaires, corporations are all holding on to 9/10 of the pie, saying they're trying to take your piece of the pie. So it's up to us to wake up and realize that we're being manipulated here. That individuals, us as people, are being manipulated into a situation out of fear, out of pain, which is genuine for normal human beings. But it is a manipulation, and it is about power over and power and control. So I think it's important to recognize that.
Great point, Eamon. And I think, I know I can see Barb's face. She wants to jump in on this, but we're going to take a short break. This is a great conversation. I just want to say that. But we hope that those of you who are watching are enjoying it and getting benefit from it. And we hope that you, as part of this, that we encourage you to support the New Thought Men's community, but also
the New Thought Media Network might be a good thing.
Media Network
as well.
The New Thought Media Network is by which sponsors this program. So let's watch this brief commercial.
We hope you're enjoying Conversations in Mind. This program is made possible by the New Thought Media Network, a nonprofit that's supporting conscious, spiritual media. If you'd like to support this work, just scan the QR code to make a donation. It lets the network know you like this show and helps them to continue bringing you this type of content. You can also go to ntmedia.org and click on Donate. Thank you for being part of the conversation. Now, back to the show.
So we do hope that if you support the New Thought Media Network, Eamon has a show on the New Thought Media Network that focuses on men's spirituality, masculine spirituality. And so again, the description in the below of the show includes links to show you all of that. But by supporting the New Thought Media Network, you get to continue seeing all these kinds of programs. It helps support us and what we're doing here by you supporting the network. So please support it. Please also like, subscribe, distribute on, share, leave a comment, leave a question, and all that good stuff. And thank you again for watching. Barb, I know you want to jump in on what Eamon was talking about right before the break.
Well, no, not really. I mean, I don't want to go too far into, we could spend hours on billionaires and racism and all that, and kind of I was like, okay, let's bring it back to men. Let's bring it back to men, because we only have this one show with Eamon, right? So really, I guess if you could wave a magic wand, what would be the one thing that you would want every man? I'll stick with the United States because, that's where we are, to know, like one tidbit of something that would shift it all for everybody. Because any work, I'm going to say this, any work that moves men to a more centered, spiritual, kind place is good for women.
Absolutely.
We don't even have to go down the road of why women choose the bear, right? So, like, it's real. Women actually do choose the bear. Yeah. And so how do we fix it? What's the one thing?
Yeah. Men's work. That's why I do what I do. It's so vital to bring men together to do that inner work. It is such a stigma in our society for men to come together, to support each other, to nurture this idea of openness, safety, community, connection, where we can explore all of these things. Like, my emotions are messed up and I don't know how to deal with them. Imagine how much that would change. Just that, learning a little bit about emotional intelligence. But there are so many experiences, and men's work is, men's circles are a huge piece and a big piece of what we do. We support our New Thought spiritual communities to have basically plug and play men's groups. And as we go through, one of the videos that they initially watch are our agreements. And the agreements are about nurturing the tools and the wisdom, the patience, the experience over time by being in a men's group and practicing these principles of trust, creating safety, listening skills, not talking over someone, using I statements, reflecting back to people what they're saying, non-judgment, all of these things. Now imagine if we had this in high school. What kind of relationships would we have? We would have much more healthy relationships with ourselves, with our families, our communities, with our intimate partners, with our kids, with the world at large. To be able to learn these skills that we have never learned, and this is intimidating for men. Most of us have been shut down at age 2, 3, 4, and said, push your emotions down. Big boys don't cry, be strong for, it's this warrior mentality. It's this, the training that lies behind that, right, is in the archetypal warrior understanding that serves society. Men are trained to be warriors. Men are trained to push those emotions down because you can't be crying on the battlefield, right? So we're trained from very young, I would even say indoctrinated from very young, to be able to not have to suppress the things that need to be suppressed to be a warrior in our society. This self-sufficiency, this rugged individualism, this celebration of the Muslim, all of these things, are simply indoctrination into us being unbalanced as human beings. Because as human beings, as men, we have emotions, right? It's not like, oh, only women have emotions. Only women can be spiritual. All of these societal bullshit, quite frankly, is a lie, right? It's meant to keep us again in these roles. And this is one of the damaging things that the societal roles do, because we want to honor the whole individual. We want to honor women can be amazing in science. It's not just guys who can be engineers, and likewise, men have such an amazing emotional intelligence, and yet it's been stuffed for so long that we're taught to stuff that. And so it's moving through all of these different stereotypes, roles that men's work can do, that simply getting together every week or every other week or even once a month with a group of men who are conscious, who want to work on these skills, who want to understand, who want to be heard, who want to share their stories and share their successes, share their struggles, share their pain, to be able to say, hey, yeah, I was raised in a house that was X. that was abusive, or that was racist, or that was, misogynistic, that was whatever it is. And I don't believe that. I don't. How do I move past that? How do I grow through these things? And so there is this expectation, because of this rugged individualism, you have to do it yourself. Well, how well does that work? Better that we have the internet. At least you can look stuff up and say, hey, okay, how can I change my belief systems? But even better yet, to be able to get together with a group of men and to work through all of these things that we're told, are unacceptable. I've been in circles where, retreats and led different things where men who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s are having their first real cry, are able to weep, in this experience of how they have suppressed their emotions throughout their entire lives. And they haven't been able to be emotionally available in relationships. They haven't been able to be there for their children emotionally. A small example of this is my dad was very much a part of the, silent generation. My parents were older, and his dad was a doctor. So they did not get much "I love you" and hugs from their dad. It was just kind of taboo. And my sisters got hugs and "I love you" from my dad all the time. But at 30, after doing men's work for quite a few years, I decided I was going to change this. And I started going over to my parents' house. And before I left, I hugged my dad and told him I loved him. And I hugged him for like 2 seconds longer than was comfortable for him. And it shifted our whole relationship. So he got it. And, within 6 months, our whole relationship had changed, because he wanted a hug come in when I showed up, and he wanted a hug when I left, and he would tell me, "I love you." And he wanted that same thing, but it was never modeled to him. And so he didn't know how to do it. So the idea of this self-sufficiency, I can figure it out myself. There are some guys, sure, who could figure it out themselves, but those guys are the guys who would definitely benefit from community, from a community of men. And we're seeing this indoctrination, you're right, Barb, into, I forget what the modern vernacular is, but basically fascism, what is it? White nationalism, or, euphemism, whatever.
All of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And because young men are being told that, they're to blame, join us. They're being offered community. They're being offered acceptance. They're being offered this thing of connection. And they're being manipulated out of hate instead of out of love, instead of out of raising their consciousness. Their consciousness is being lowered, and they're being indoctrinated into this fear, into this hate, and which perpetuates the cycle. We as human beings need love. We need encouragement. We need upliftment. We need mentors and elders and people to say, hey, it's not about that. Like, the end of the day, what do you get when you hate people? You get hate. At the end of the day, what do you get when you love people? You get love. Come on. It's self-reflecting. It's self-evident. Which one lights you up? Which one fills you with joy? Which one enlivens and enlightens and uplifts and nurtures the best in you? It's love every single time. Hate gets you nothing but hate and pain and fear and stuckness.
Eamon, I loved your answer there. I was going, okay, you put this so beautifully to Barb's question, and I was simply thinking the person who, in answer to Barb's question, was that the person needs to understand how they have been indoctrinated, and that they can change that, and that they need the space and the area for self-examination and to change their thinking about what they've accepted as being a man. But it's men's work. That's exactly what you were describing. I would add, that for many people, it's hard to understand why it's difficult for a man to make that step into men's work. And it's because of the very indoctrination that says you can fix yourself. You don't need anybody else. And this is so different from women. Women are trained to be communal, to reach out and connect with other people. And men are trained, whether it's externally based or just by modeled behavior, they're trained that you suck it up and you figure it out yourself. And hence when they don't know what to do, they bottle it up. So now fast forward to today's situation where you got people who are in the midst of this changing society, and society's roles are changing. The dating roles are changing. The method in which you date and find a partner is changing. And people and young men don't know what to do. And what they see is an effort that is supporting the women, but is not supporting them. And we could debate whether that's true or not, but that's the perception that many men get these days, is there's nothing there to show them the path. Well, men's work is here. What Eamon's doing is working to help these men, move forward, but they don't know about it. And instead they see other models in life, and they find very charismatic people that say, oh, and a person that we want to denigrate because they've latched onto a philosophy that seems hateful and harmful. And it's easy to want to say, let's just toss these people out. We need to look beyond what they're exhibiting in their behavior and see the underlying value of that person, and how they've sort of been tricked into believing a model of actions and beliefs about people that is so repellent to us that it's hard to open our hearts to them. But somehow or another, we need to do that, to look beyond their behavior and say, how did they get to this belief system where they believe that, the other, whoever the other is in their mind, whether it's women, trans, gays, other races, etc., other faiths, they create an other in their mind so that they can lock into a security and comfort of their community who wants this in-group, out-group other that we can turn against. And call it fascism or Nazism or whatever, but it's a mindset that turns people against an other so that they can find meaning in their individual lives. And somehow or another, we need to step in and break that cycle. It means coming at them not with hate, but with love, as Eamon's talking about. But it means also having a healthy boundary against their negative behavior and finding a connection between where you can find an inroad to break that cycle that's going on within them. It does us no good in the long run just to fight them and turn against them and denigrate them. Yes, have a healthy boundary and call out the behavior, but never make the behavior totally linked to the person. And have compassion for how that person. I often say, if I had lived their life and had their experiences, I would probably believe and act like they did, as repellent and repugnant as it is. And that opens me to at least a degree of compassion. And if I can open that ounce of compassion within me for somebody whose behavior is so abhorrent, then it helps me to see maybe I can look for a way to help turn them around and bring them back to love. And I think if you can find the opening, you can make the shift. I think people really are, they're just looking for meaning. They're looking for support. They're looking for community. They're looking for love. And they're getting love in an in-group that makes demons of an out-group. But at least they've got that love. And it's they've just found the wrong environment in the wrong place. And somebody with a charismatic outlook on life is convinced them of something that is truly not their greatest belief.
So I know we're running low on time, but I kind of want to talk, if it's all right. I mean, you guys can change this. We have this sort of, I would call it earned reputation in our churches, our spiritual communities, as being 70% women over 60 with gray hair, right? And so while I was still doing local ministry, I was really intentional about not that. And so I had my and Eamon, you came and helped us start a men's group actually years and years and years ago, back, way before COVID, when now I know you're doing it again in Northern Colorado because everything's new again, right? But
It's great.
but I had as many men as women. Couples came together. We had families. It was mostly people under 50. So let's speak to that, because to me, there were things that I did that were really intentional to do that. I did not have foofy crap all over my stage or my altar. I wore suits. I did not wear goddess wear. I worked sports metaphors into my talks, even about sports I didn't understand very well, that I wasn't a fan of. I worked science into my talks. I actually worked at it to make sure that happened. So if you were talking to a group of ministers, some of whom we're talking to today, what would you say are the things? What are the things that are the turnoffs when guys walk into the room in a whole lot of our churches? Because for me, as a person, and let's be real, I'm a person who spent my whole life kind of in the middle of this space between the masculine and feminine. I live very much in the middle of that. So when I walk in and there's a bunch of fake flowers all over the place and foofy crap all over the place, I don't like it. I don't. I think it's distracting and not attractive, but that's just my personal opinion. But I actually do think that some of that busyness, what I've read about men's brains versus women's brains, is that some of that busyness is a problem and a turnoff. Got anything on this, or am I just...
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a lot. There's a lot there. We could do a whole show on just that, believe me.
Right?
But I think one is offering men a place to land, which would be a men's group. Being able to show up, like many of the things that you talked about, being able to show up in a way that is welcoming to everyone. To have the space be neutral. In that sense, to change our beliefs, right? Come on, people, like, this is what we believe, right? So how do we shift our own level of awareness around this? And I think one of the things is, I have a joke. It's not terribly funny, but what's the difference between a New Thought minister and a fundamentalist minister? So the fundamentalist ministers goes, Jesus, the Bible, God, God, God. And the New Thought minister goes, God, 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 Jesus, the Bible. The point is, some people may not find it funny.
There's a whole talk in that.
Right? The whole point is that when we look at the Pew Report and what people are looking for, especially younger people, they're looking for a space for spiritual growth. They just left religion, or they were brought up in religion. That was me. When I was 20 years old, I'm like, screw the church. Like, I never want to see a church again. It took me 2 years to go to Mile High Church because it was named a church instead of a spiritual center. So I think to do the same thing that organized religions are doing, and this is my point, is the same thing. It looks the same to people.
You're on one of my 4 soapboxes right now. Just
He's also summarizing what we did in a prior program where we looked at where communities are going. And
I know I did it for years, but now I would never go back to it for all of these reasons. Like, my thing is that we took this beautiful teaching and we planted it on top of a Christian church service.
Yeah.
And it's never really worked.
And where we came down in our prior conversation was that people are looking for community. They're looking for an opportunity to interact with other people in community. So small groups and things of that nature, and also experiences that where you get a taste of God, but also an experience where you can talk about your life and get reactions to what your beliefs are. And so those two things. And so, Barb, for me, if you walk into the place, I think it would be very conscious for a minister to take a look at the environment and the message they're being sent for all people, whether it's because we tend to do what we're comfortable with and what we've done. And so I think creating but creating groups, and when somebody walks in the door, it's hard to create an environment that speaks to everybody, but you need to create the niches within the community that you can point them to that will speak to them. And I think that's why men's work with any spiritual community is very, very important.
But I also love what Eamon said about making the environment as neutral as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something in that for folks out there who might be listening or might,
when we do podcasts and we do our summits, we do an annual summit. So we have amazing speakers, ministers from all over New Thought come in, men and women. And we ask them, we're like, please use neutral language. Don't use religious style of languaging. Try and use spirit. Try and use the universal life force. Try and use consciousness or the cosmos. Try and use these more scientific terms, these more neutral terms, because for me, coming in at 20, I was just so turned off by some of the Catholic iconography that was present. And that was the part that I really struggled with. And honestly, I still struggle with today. So I'm hyper aware of what am I walking into here? When I'm showing up, is there a men's group? Is there a women's group? Is there a place where men and women can come together and do some work?
Is there family groups or
groups, yeah, supporting kids, all of these things, pretty simple stuff. When we look at it, it's like, what is the future? Look to the future and then set our sights on that. I think, one more thing before we go, and I just kind of want to wrap up, because we talked about how does masculinity, which all of us have, how do we balance that masculinity and that strength and spirituality within us? And I do want to say, a friend of mine, Michelle Whittington, who's the director of the affiliated New Thought Network, she gave a brilliant talk at that retreat called Soul Force. And I think this is the thing, is what we're deepening into as a spiritual community, is to use our spiritual practices, to use that Sunday or that time together that we have to, excuse me, thunder here.
Oh, wow, really? Cool.
Yeah, it's raining pretty good, actually.
Good.
Yes, we need it here in Colorado. But to build those practices in spiritual community, which, I think centers need to do, how do we raise the frequency, as it were, of us so that we can take that out into our daily lives? And that's the daily spiritual practice. When we practice those things, when we build this resiliency, when we build this energy around us, when we build this support network, when we build community and connection, we're able to stand in a way in the world, we're able to stand up to people and stand in our values and hold that boundary and say, no, this isn't the America that I believe in. This isn't the spiritual consciousness of which I'm a part of. This isn't, who I want to, participate or support with. This is what I believe, and to stand in that. And there's a beautiful story real quick, that these monks, they were basically having they were doing a walk, as often is done in Buddhism. And so they were having the sacred walk where they were going and they were bowing, and then they take another step and they bow. It's this whole thing. It's amazing and incredible. And at one point, they were going through, a southern state. I don't recall which, and people showed up, and literally a gang of people showed up and were like, we're going to beat you up. And, the leader just stood and, bowed to them. And the guy who was supposed to be initiated into the gang, was supposed to hit him or beat him up or whatever. And he wound up not being able to do that because of this soul force. These monks were so rooted in the truth of who they were, that they were spiritual beings, and this was their brother. and that he wasn't going to hurt them. And he wound up not being able to do it. The gang wound up turning around and leaving because they were different, right? Because it wasn't the norm. And so when we have this deep practice of our soul practices, our spiritual practices, which are then reinforced by our spiritual community, by our loved ones in our home, by our friends, our family, then this is the strength, I think, that we're talking about today. This is the desire for us to move into, and what's going to be required with the shifts and changes. There is already these extreme polarizations, not only politically, societally, but environmentally as well. We need to create community, and a connected community that holds these beliefs in high regard, in high consciousness, in this greater understanding of who we truly are. Not, I'm Eamon, I'm this physical human being, and I'm that too, this emotional being, this mental being, but we are rooted. The deep root comes from the soul, and that is beyond time and beyond space. This is the temporary experience of us, of this physical world. We're blessed to be able to be inhibited in these, physical bodies and have all the joys and the wonderment that provides, and also all the challenge and the struggle these days. And I don't know that it's ever been any different throughout time, throughout the experience of humanity anyhow. And so when we hold this higher consciousness, when we come from this place of the deep-rooted spiritual understanding of who we are, that I am whole, that I am love, that I am peace, that I am wisdom, that I am divine presence, I am service, I am health, I am joy, I am love, then we're shifting that belief system that we've been indoctrinated into since we were in our the womb, birthed, growing up, the societal systems. We transcend those systems and we move into a deeper system of understanding and self-referencing, and the deeper truth that we know to be true, because we know this truth. I think anyone who is sitting with the challenge can sit deeply with themselves and simply ask, what is the truth here? And I think that more than anything will change people, because it's self-evident of who we really are and the greatness that we are and the potential that we have to show up in our divine presence in this worldly experience. That's it, as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for the time to be able to speak to that soul force, because I think it's necessary now more than ever in our society as we're struggling with all these changes that are happening in so many different avenues. And it's for the greater good. It's leading us to this greater experience of oneness and wholeness and beauty, a world that can work for all instead of work for just a few. We're ready. We're moving into it. And it requires community. It requires consciousness. And it requires, our showing up as the beingness that we truly are.
Eamon, thank you so much for that summary and sharing that. And thank you for being with us today. I think that's a beautiful conclusion to our conversation. Barb, anything more you want to add?
No, it's a good day. Thank you all for listening. I hope you gained something wonderful today, and we will see you next week.
Take care.